Let's talk about resumes. When people are looking for a job, they often spend a lot of time stressing about their resume. And the resume is important, but there's a lot of what I might call cargo cult mentality going around about resumes. What matters and what doesn't, and exactly what is a good resume. Now, my resume is going to be different from your resume in that I've been doing this for a long time, so I've got a lot of experience and I've done a lot of things. But I'm going to show you my resume and we're going to go over it. And maybe you can get some good ideas for things to put on your resume. Now, I'll tell you right now some things not to put on your resume if you're in the United States, that is, because that's where I am. So that's all I can really speak to. Do not put your gender, your picture, your religious affiliation, your political affiliation, or anything like that on your resume. There's very little about that kind of stuff that employers care about, and it will get you discounted as unprofessional if you do that kind of thing in the US. And I say that because I have hired teams in other countries, I've worked in other countries, I have received resumes and interviewed people in other parts of the world, and in some places it is common to do that sort of thing, but not here, not in the US. So definitely don't put those kind of things on your resume. Keep it strictly about your talents, your skills, things directly related to the job that you are applying for. So let's take a look at my resume. So this is it. You'll notice let's see, this resume is apparently, I always code the date. I code the date in the file name and in the footer of each page so that I and anybody else looking at this knows whether this is a recent resume or not. If it's more than a couple years old, probably needs updating because I'm always doing new stuff. So I have my name at the top, my certifications, some contact info. I put my LinkedIn on here. The LinkedIn is pretty much just as good as my resume, maybe even better. It just depends on what you're looking for. But it's got a lot of the same kinds of information. It has my work history. Oftentimes I will post to my LinkedIn these kind of accomplishments. If you're getting started, you won't have nearly as much, but you can definitely have your name, a phone number, your email address, your LinkedIn. I generally put the kind of title I'm looking for. Like at the moment, I generally bill myself as a security architect. Now, sometimes I sell myself specifically as a cloud security architect, sometimes as an instructor, an educator, a mentor. Sometimes I've done a little bit of virtual CISO type work. I may be doing more of that in the near future. And so it just kind of varies, but this is my generic resume. Usually in these last few years, I've been going for security architect type positions. Definitely tailor the resume to the job that you are applying for. And I know sometimes that's hard to do, especially if you're blasting a lot of resumes out there. You might go with something kind of generic, but if there's a job in particular that you really want, it's got a lot of potential, tailor your resume to the job. So, you can put the title you're looking for. This is what you consider yourself to be. You think you can do this job. You can put that right there. I say personal examples of source code configs, implementing security controls, security matrices, white papers, and references are available upon request. Now, this basically means like my GitHub, right? If somebody wants to know that I can program Python and they ask for an example, I'll send them a link. Or I might just attach the code depending on their preference. I've got various Ansible configs and all kinds of things that I have done personally that are mine to share. So I keep all that stuff. Remember in another video, I talked about keeping a portfolio. And this is where that can come in handy. Security matrices, I put that on there because a few years ago I did this big project where there were all these different security standards. What there was ISO, there was NIST, there was like NY something 500, a New York specific financial security standard. And I think there was one more. I don't remember what it was. But basically, I had to sort of cross-reference all these different security standards together and build this great big spreadsheet, which was essentially a matrix of how these different security standards related to each other. And there was a lot of overlap, right? So you might implement one security control. That means it satisfies this part, this part, this part, and this part of these different security standards. It was a big project and it was kind of neat. And as it happened, I was able to keep part of that project. And I had a sort of an example of a security matrix that I had done, putting all these controls together. I've actually done that several times, but on one particular project, I was able to retain a sort of generic version of it, without any company identifying information on it. So if anybody ever wanted to see that, I could show that as, I understand how these different security compliance programs relate to one another. White papers. I once wrote a white paper on HIPAA describing a HIPAA security program that I wrote for a client of mine. I own that white paper, so I can just remove references to the specific client's name, and that's freely available for me to distribute as an example. The funny thing is, I've had this on here for a long time. Very rarely has anybody actually asked for any of this, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if maybe they don't care, or if maybe, because I've had no problem getting jobs, or maybe just having it there on offer suggests that I've got the confidence to provide these things. I don't know, but I still think it's a good thing to have. If you are a programmer, if you're going for a programmer-specific job, you might just put a link to your GitHub right there, right up front and center, where they can go browse it. Make sure you've got some nice examples of code in there. Key accomplishments. I was told at one point, and I think it's true, that it says a lot more about you rather than to just list all the places you've worked and what you did specifically. As far as accomplishments, what you really did, things that, finishing projects. And if you're just getting started, you may have on here that your key accomplishment might be that you just finished your degree in IT or whatever, and you had some big senior year final project kind of thing. You could put that there. Maybe you built and secured your own personal home infrastructure. And in securing it, maybe you decided that you wanted to follow NIST guidance or PCI guidance. If you got something specific, you can put on there some security standard that you say you've secured it to. I think that would be compelling. That would be pretty cool. You can see on here, I've got lots of stuff because I've done lots of stuff again. I founded a little startup, which unfortunately was not successful, but I learned a lot from it. And I learned a lot about what I don't want to do in the future. Secured Docker Kubernetes containers, gave presentations on container security with Twistlock. That's more of what I did, not so much an accomplishment. Maybe that doesn't really belong there. I did help a company achieve SOC 2 Type 2 in AWS. That was cool. I think my job as a UCSD instructor is an accomplishment. I think that's cool. So most of the rest of these things. Extensive experience with system security monitoring via custom log analysis tools. And that's not so much an accomplishment. Again, that's just something I kind of did. But you get the idea. Most of these things up here are key accomplishments. Really, every time I look at my resume, I think about maybe I should change something. Maybe I should update this. Maybe, these things really aren't key accomplishments. Maybe they don't really belong there. And my resume is kind of information dense and rather verbose. Yours won't be, especially if you're getting started. You hear people talk about the one-page resume. No resume should ever be longer than one page. I think that's nonsense. If you've done enough stuff to legitimately have more than one page of stuff to talk about, yeah, make it more than one page, no problem. Now, most people are going to look at the first page and then decide whether it warrants reading through the rest. Nobody is ever going to get a 6-page resume and then just straight up say, oh my God, this is 6 pages, throw it away. No, even on a 6-page resume, they're going to look at the first page. And if the first page is clearly not impressive, not relevant to the job, then they're going to throw away all 6 pages. But if the first page is relevant, it's compelling, it looks like you might have what it takes to do this job, then they're going to look and see what else you've done. But you want the first page particularly appropriate and compelling, to make them want to hire you for the job. Let's just scroll down here a little more. So, and then comes my employment history, which is what most resumes are about. So, I've got my contact information, my credentials, my LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff up here, some key accomplishments, and then all the rest is pretty much employment history. I've made my resume kind of compact, right? I put the date, because as my experience grows, my resume gets longer and longer and longer. I want to be able to pack in as much relevant information as possible, but not make it 20 pages long. So I try to keep things kind of dense. I've got the dates on here, and then the company, like all on the same line, a few sentences about everything I did. Now, and one thing that I did when I switched from being primarily a Linux system administrator who was interested in security, back then, my resume was all about Linux and being a Linux system administrator. 10 or 15 years ago, when the cybersecurity business really started to take off and people started hiring security teams, and I decided I really wanted to focus purely on cybersecurity, I went through my resume and adjusted everything to focus more on the security aspects of what I did in my Linux system administrator job. So I kind of refocused my resume. And so, even back when I was at when I was back at this particular company, I was really like a lead product developer developing the operating system configuration and distribution. It was Linux. I wasn't developing an operating system, but I was configuring and customizing for their storage products. And only a relatively small part of that job was security. But, shortly after this time, I started looking at security jobs specifically. And I was in charge of security for this product. But a lot of what I did in practice was more system administration type stuff. But I retuned this section to specifically mention STIG compliance. So I made sure I mentioned security. And I did a little bit of that back here, but most of this is like system administration, operational type stuff. But yeah, and also you'll notice this is a footer. In Word, or I use LibreOffice, but in most word processing softwares, you can put a footer on every page. So I put page numbers, and again, I put the version number with basically year, month, date coded into it, so you can know how recent this resume is. And when it gets in recruiters' databases and everything, they've got some idea of how old the resume is. But yeah, back to work history. I pretty much all the last years of positions have been security related, and even the ones from before then, I made focused on security wherever possible. I highlighted the security aspects of those jobs. So down here, oh, and, uh, I am 47 years old now. I may be looking at possible age discrimination issues in the near future, unfortunately. Hopefully not, but in a way, the tech industry is somewhat more enlightened, but also it does tend to be a very ageist industry in that they want young people who don't have families, don't have kids, don't have um, any other factors in their life, any time sinks, right? So you can put in the long hours working for the company, and older people tend not to be able to do that. And we've got so much experience that we generally command pretty good salaries. And a friend of mine pointed out that I might want to take off, these last several entries on my resume so that it doesn't make me look so old. I hope he's wrong there, but I may end up doing that someday. That'll be sad. But it'll also serve to refocus my career on dropping off some of these early system administrator jobs. It's not dishonest to drop information off of your resume that's not so relevant anymore. And speaking of that, definitely do not lie or exaggerate on your resume. When people say they know Linux or they know SE Linux or they know IP tables or they know antivirus or some specific kind of technology, if you get into an interview on the basis of your resume and they start asking you questions about it and it becomes clear that you've lied on your resume, that's bad. I mean, well, they can't put you in jail, they can't sue you or anything, but it's going to be embarrassing and you're not going to get the job. So after the work history, I put other talents and affiliations. Some of this stuff is not necessarily relevant to security, but some of these things can make for good talking points during the interview. Because oftentimes they'll ask you, oh, what do you like to do when you're not at work? Or got any hobbies or anything like that? And it's good to have something to make you a more interesting person than you do nothing but security your whole life. I mean, hey, if you eat, live, and breathe security, that's great, but you got to have a life too. And so, I've got some of my other things on here, especially security related or technology related things. There was a Linux user group here in town that I was active in for a long time. I suppose I should update this because I used to be the president and member of the San Diego Computer Society, but this organization and this organization actually are now defunct as of these last couple of years. They don't exist anymore. So I need to update that. I was in the cloud security. I was secretary of the local chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance. I should put that on here because that's actually security related. And I should take off some of these other things. And I speak Spanish and I am interested in ham radio, a couple of other things, These things are generally totally irrelevant to my work though. So I could probably take them off also, but I leave them on there just because, makes you a slightly more interesting person. Now, I've recently added this whole section, which kind of adds a whole page to my resume, but I like to show that I am active in speaking and giving presentations and teaching classes, and I've been interviewed for magazines, and I've done, I recently did a video interview for security in the Raspberry Pi single board computer, security applications for it. And I do not have that linked on here, so I should add that. But yeah, if you've published any papers, written any books, given any talks, anything, put that on here. And it's, you're probably not going to be able to go out and just get a book published anytime soon. But what you can do is go to your local meetup. Go to meetup, meetup.com, I think it is. Let me just make sure. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah. Go to meetup.com. Get an account there. Look for security events, security groups, or even just technology groups. If you're into Linux, find a local Linux user group. If you're into cloud, find some sort of cloud thing. There might be a chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance, something like that. Find those groups. Then offer to give a talk on some related technology or security topic. Those kind of groups have a lot of trouble finding people to give presentations because it's the presentations and things that draw people in to attend. I know from experience because I ran the Linux user group and the San Diego Computer Society for a lot of years, and it was always a major pain in the butt to find someone willing to step up and do something for the group, whether that was some administrative task, run the group website, whatever, or to even just give a presentation. I feel like I gave half the presentations at those group meetings over the years just because we didn't have anybody else to do so. So there's a tip for you. Go to meetup.com, find groups related to whatever technology, security you are into, and offer to give a talk. And you don't really have to be all that much of an expert. All you got to do is know more than most of the people attending. And if it's something brand new, some new piece of software that's just come out, some new service, something, or if it's just something obscure, the vast majority of people in attendance aren't going to know anything about it, and you'll be the expert in the room. It's actually not that hard to become the expert in the room on something brand new or obscure. So then, once they've scheduled you to do it, they'll put you on their meetup page. Like you see right here, here's one. This right here, meetup.com, Open Web Application Security Project, San Diego, events, and then some event number. I gave a talk at OWASP. They were looking for people to give talks. Again, they were having trouble getting people to give talks also. So I volunteered. I gave a talk on, I think, at the time I was really big into Elasticsearch and putting logs into Elasticsearch and doing sort of data mining on your logs, finding security events, finding indicators of compromise. And I gave a talk on that. It was great. And then I took the link from the meetup group showing that I gave the talk, put it on my resume. You may also want to screenshot that talk, from the event thing from their page and put it in your good press folder. That's kind of like in your portfolio. Remember, in one of the other videos here, I gave a talk on collecting good press about yourselves and collecting things, positive things that people say about you. And you can include good things that you've done as well, like giving talks and so on. That's one easy way to get something to put in there. Let's see, what else do we have here? I think this is pretty much it. Yes, so that's the end. But look, my resume, it's just not as long as I thought. It's just spilled onto 5 pages. But I've done a lot to try to keep it compact and dense. And I've gone through over the years, because this is going back to 96. And actually, I had a part-time job for the 5 summers before 96. But that's not really even directly technology related. It was only part-time, and it was so long ago, I don't put it on here. It was cool, though. So that's pretty much it for resumes. There's really not much about the cybersecurity business which is specific, as far as resumes go. It's just like the rest of the IT and technology business. And don't worry about the people who say that your resume has to be a particular format, has to be just so. The people reading your resume have no idea what that particular format is. We have no standard we're comparing it against. There is rarely anything that we see on your resume that's going to make us throw it straight in the trash. Unless, you put a big picture of yourself when you say, I'm XYZ religion and I follow so-and-so political party or whatever. Well, in the US, then we're going to question your judgment, and then it might go straight in the trash. Run the spell checker on your resume. every time I rewrite my resume, if I change some things on it, usually sometime later, I'll go back and I'll find a mistake. Oh, that's always embarrassing. So make sure you run the spell checker. And in our business, there are lots of acronyms that your spell checker is not going to understand. AWS, UCSD, FISMA, PCI, Kibana, Splunk. I see all the, and SOC and VC, and I see all these words just right in here that your spell checker is not going to know. Add those to your spell checker carefully, making sure you're not adding any typos to your spell checker, because then it'll never tell you about them again. And when I make changes, I save it, I put it away, I come back a day or two later and read it again to make sure there aren't any mistakes, because it's real easy. Right after you write something, you look at it, and your eye just glides right past the same mistake over and over again. You need some time away from it. That's true for any kind of writing, really. But yeah, there is no particular format. There is no special professional resume writing. A lot of people get hung up on, it can only be one page, and you got to have your name here, and you got to have it this way and that way. Nobody cares, really. I don't care. And I doubt anybody that I've ever interviewed with has really cared. Nobody's ever really commented one way or another on anything I've done wrong, or really any suggestions for my resume. And I've done a lot of interviewing and a lot of pitching myself to clients and handing out my resume. And yeah, that's pretty much it for resumes. There's a few things. That's what my resume is. I think it works. It's gotten me results. I get interviews. Oh, one more thing about resumes. If you have experience with a particular technology, put it on your resume. Keywords. Generic prose to fully confine hosted internet application, all that kind of stuff. The human reading it would care. But the thing is, a lot of these resumes go into like keyword searching systems, right? They will search for all the resumes containing the word PCI, because they want somebody familiar with PCI compliance, or Linux, or some particular technology. So if you've got experience with those technologies, make sure, or like industry specific words and buzzwords, put those in your resume, because the HR systems, the resume processing, document management systems, whatever they are using, a lot of them key in on keywords. Now, don't gratuitously stuff your resume with keywords that are irrelevant or that describe technologies that you have no experience with. That's just going to make you look silly, and then a human's going to get your resume. They're going to see the resume as silly and throw it away. Or if you put some technology keyword on your resume that gets you the interview and you don't know it and they start asking you questions about it, that's going to be a problem. But yes, definitely put the keywords. I mentioned the particular cloud, the particular compliance regimes, the particular technologies, particular pieces of software, things like that, all throughout my resume. And security architect, that's a big one also, actually. A lot of people will be looking to hire a security architect, somebody who can lead their developers and non-security people on how to build things securely. So that's another good tip, keywords. Okay, that is it for now. I hope you have found this little discussion of resumes to be useful. There's a few tips in there, but there's really no super special magic as far as writing a resume for the cybersecurity business. Catch you next time.